January 18th, 1929, 0820 hours. Duncan MacLeod stood at the window of Corrour Station, the highest railway station in Britain at 1,339 feet, watching snow accumulate at 4 inches per hour. He'd been the station master here for 11 years. He'd seen Scottish winter before. Nothing like this. The train from Fort William, due at 08:15, hadn't arrived. The telegraph line was dead. The road to Rannoch, 6 miles south, was impassable. MacLeod and 14 other people at Corrour Station were cut off from the world. Standard wisdom said wait. The snow would stop. The line would clear. Rescue would come. The snow didn't stop for 6 weeks. This is the story of the 1929 Highland snow siege, when the most remote station in Britain became a prison, when rescue operations failed repeatedly, and when survival depended on a community that refused to give up. The geography of isolation Corrour Station sits in the middle of nowhere. Rannoch Moor, Scottish Highlands, 15 miles from the nearest village. No roads connect it to civilization, only the West Highland Railway line. Built in 1894, the station served shepherds, gamekeepers, hunting lodges. Maybe 30 people lived within walking distance. In summer, it's beautiful. Rolling moorland, mountains, lochs. Isolation is romantic when the weather's good. In winter, it's lethal. January 1929 brought the worst winter Scotland had seen in 40 years. A high-pressure system stalled over Scandinavia. Arctic air poured south. Temperature at Corrour dropped to minus 18 Celsius and stayed there. Snow began falling January 17th. It didn't stop until March 1st. 6 weeks of continuous or near-continuous snowfall. Total accumulation at Corrour, approximately 9 feet on level ground. Drifts in exposed areas, 25 feet. The railway line disappeared. The telegraph failed. The roads, such as they were, became impassable canyons of snow. Corrour Station had 15 people trapped. Duncan MacLeod, station master, age 43. His wife Margaret, age 41. Their daughter Ellen, age 16. 3 railway maintenance workers. 2 gamekeepers from nearby estates. 4 guests at Corrour Lodge, a hunting lodge half a mile from the station. 2 shepherds who'd been at the station when the storm hit. 15 people. Adequate shelter, limited food, no communication with the outside world. The first week MacLeod's initial assessment was optimistic. They had the station building, solid stone construction, heated by coal stove. They had the lodge nearby. Food supplies were tight but manageable for maybe 10 days if rationed. The telegraph was down, but surely someone would notice the train hadn't arrived. Rescue would come. Day 1, January 18th. Snow continued. No rescue. Day 2, still snowing. MacLeod and the maintenance workers attempted to clear the railway line. They managed 40 yards before giving up. Snow was falling faster than they could shovel. The mathematics didn't work. Day 3. The coal supply became a concern. The station had perhaps 2 tons stockpiled, enough for weeks if used carefully. But in minus 18 Celsius, conservation meant cold nights. Day 4. Food inventory. The station's storeroom had oatmeal, approximately 50 pounds, tinned goods, assorted, maybe 30 tins, tea, sugar, flour, potatoes, turnips, 2 sheep carcasses in the cold store at the lodge. Estimated supply, 10 to 12 days for 15 people at normal rations. Day 5, still snowing. The isolation became psychological as much as physical. No word from the outside, no knowledge if anyone knew they were trapped. Day 6, MacLeod made a decision. Ration everything immediately. Cut food consumption to survival minimums. Assume no rescue for at least 2 weeks. Day 7. Someone tried walking out. One of the gamekeepers, younger man, strong. He attempted to reach Rannoch, 6 miles south. Made it maybe half a mile before turning back. Snow too deep, wind too strong, temperature too cold. Walking out wasn't an option. By the end of week 1, the reality settled in. They were genuinely trapped. Rescue wasn't coming quickly. They'd have to survive until the weather broke. The rescue attempts. What MacLeod and the trapped group didn't know, rescue efforts had started immediately. January 18th evening, Fort William Railway Office noticed the train hadn't completed its run. Standard protocol. Send a locomotive to investigate. January 19th. A locomotive departed Fort William at 700, attempting to reach Corrour. It made it 12 miles before encountering drifts the plough couldn't handle. Stopped, reversed, returned to Fort William. January 20th. Second attempt. Different approach. A larger locomotive with a bigger plough. Same result. Stopped by drifts before reaching Corrour. January 21st to 23rd. Weather too severe for any attempts. Snow continuing, visibility 0, temperatures -15 to -20 Celsius. January 24th. Third rescue attempt. This time from the south. A locomotive from Glasgow attempted to approach via the southern route. Stopped by massive drifts near Bridge of Orkney, still miles from Corrour. The railway company realised conventional methods weren't working. The snow was too deep, too widespread, too constant. They needed a different approach. January 26th. The decision was made to attempt a ground rescue. A party of men on foot equipped with supplies would try to reach Corrour from Rannoch. If they couldn't bring the trapped people out, they'd at least deliver food and fuel. January 27th. The rescue party departed. 6 men, experienced hill walkers, carrying packs with food, medical supplies and coal. The 6-mile journey from Rannoch to Corrour should take maybe 2 hours in normal conditions. It took them 11 hours. They reached Corrour at 1840 hours exhausted. But they brought supplies. 80 pounds of food, 50 pounds of coal, mail, news. The psychological impact was enormous. The trapped group wasn't forgotten. Someone was trying. They could hold on. The rescue party stayed one night, then returned to Rannoch on January 28th. The return journey took 9 hours, week 2 to week 4. The resupply on January 27th bought time, but it didn't solve the problem. 15 people were still trapped. The weather continued. The snow kept falling. The routine became grinding. Wake, conserve heat, ration food, clear snow from doors and windows, sleep, repeat, day after day, week after week. Morale varied. Some days were better. Someone would tell stories, or they'd organise activities to keep spirits up. Other days were silent, cold, desperate. The coal ran low again by early February. Another rescue party reached them February 8th with more supplies, then again February 16th. Each time, the journey from Rannoch became more difficult. The accumulated snow was building, drifts were solidifying. By late February, 4 weeks into the siege, the situation was stable but grim. Nobody was starving, nobody was freezing. But the confinement, the uncertainty, the endless cold, it wore people down. Ellen MacLeod, age 16, later described it. The worst part wasn't the cold or the hunger. It was the not knowing when it would end. Every morning you'd wake up and hope today was the day the snow stopped, and every morning it was still falling. The break March 1st, 1929. The snow stopped. After 6 weeks of continuous or near-continuous snowfall, the weather system finally moved. Temperature rose slightly. The sky cleared. March 2nd. Railway crews from both Fort William and Glasgow began serious clearing operations, not rescue attempts, full systematic clearing, locomotives with heavy ploughs, crews of men with shovels, coordinated from both directions, March 3rd to 5th. Progress was slow, 9 feet of accumulated snow, 25-foot drifts, frozen solid. The railway line was buried under the biggest accumulation anyone could remember. March 6th. The southern crew from Glasgow broke through to Corrour first. The train arrived at 1420 hours, 6 weeks and 2 days after the siege began. Duncan MacLeod, Margaret, Ellen, and the 12 others walked out of Corrour Station to the waiting train. 43 days trapped, all 15 survived. The evacuation took 2 hours. They loaded what they could carry, left the rest. The train departed Corrour at 16:35, heading south to Glasgow. The siege was over. The aftermath. The 1929 Highland snow siege made national news. 6 weeks trapped in Highland Station ran in every major paper. The MacLeod family, the railway workers, the gamekeepers, the lodge guests, all were interviewed. The story was dramatic, human, compelling, but it also exposed serious questions about Britain's infrastructure resilience. Corrour Station was a known location, on a major railway line. Yet it took 43 days to reach 15 trapped people. The criticism was immediate. Why hadn't rescue come faster? Why were attempts so ineffective? Why was Britain's railway system so vulnerable to weather? The railway companies defended themselves. Unprecedented snow, impossible conditions, did everything possible. True to a point. But the fundamental problem remained. When extreme weather hit remote locations, Britain's infrastructure failed. The response was institutional. The Highland Railway Emergency Protocols were developed in 1930. New requirements: all remote stations must maintain minimum 30-day emergency supplies for maximum occupancy. Emergency communication systems beyond telegraph, eventually radio. Designated rescue teams trained for winter operations. Improved snow-clearing equipment on all Highland lines. The protocols were direct responses to Corrour. Bureaucratic, incremental, but they mattered. The human cost. None of the Corrour 15 died. All survived physically intact. But the psychological impact lingered. Duncan MacLeod continued as station master at Corrour until 1935, then transferred to a position in Inverness. Never explained why publicly, but colleagues noted he seemed reluctant to face another Highland winter. At Corrour, Ellen MacLeod, 16 during the siege, moved to Edinburgh in 1931, became a teacher, never returned to the Highlands. In interviews later in life, she was matter-of-fact. "I don't hate the place, but 6 weeks trapped there was enough for a lifetime." The others dispersed. The gamekeepers returned to their work. The railway workers continued on the line. The lodge guests never came back to Corrour Lodge, but they stayed in touch. For years afterward, the Corrour 15, as they became known, would meet annually in Glasgow. A reunion of sorts. A way to process what they'd endured together. The last reunion was in 1964. 8 of the original 15 attended. Duncan MacLeod, then 78, gave a brief speech. "We survived because we didn't panic. We rationed. We helped each other. And we believed someone would come. That's all survival is, belief that tomorrow will be better." He died in 1967, Margaret in 1971, Ellen in 1998 at age 85. The legacy nobody remembers. The 1929 Highland snow siege faded from national memory quickly. By the mid-1930s it was a footnote. World War II erased it completely from public consciousness. Today, almost nobody knows it happened. But the institutional changes lasted. The Highland Railway Emergency Protocols remained in force until the 1960s, when British Rail absorbed them into broader safety regulations. Remote stations across Scotland maintained emergency supplies. Radio communication became standard. Rescue procedures improved. Corrour Station still operates. Still remote. Still the highest station in Britain. Tourists visit now. Hill walkers, nature enthusiasts. Maybe 30 passengers per day in summer, fewer in winter. There's a small plaque inside the station building. Installed in 1979, 50 years after the siege. It reads, "In memory of the 15 souls trapped here during the Great Snow of 1929. Their endurance reminds us that isolation is survived through community. Most visitors don't notice it. The snow still comes to Corrour every winter, sometimes heavy, sometimes light. But nothing like 1929. That was singular. Standard wisdom says wait for rescue. Trust that help will come." The Corrour 15 waited 43 days. Survived because they didn't just wait. They rationed, organised, supported each other, and held on. Rescue came eventually, but survival came from within. That's the lesson nobody remembers from the 1929 Highland snow siege. Institutions can fail. Weather can be merciless. Geography can trap you. What saves you is what you do while you wait. Duncan MacLeod understood that. So did the other 14. They organised their resources. They maintained discipline. They supported each other through 6 weeks of isolation. And when the train finally arrived on March 6th, they walked out alive. All 15. The snow melted. The railway resumed. Life continued. But the siege left its mark. In institutional protocols. In personal memories. In the understanding that sometimes survival is measured not in dramatic rescues, but in quiet endurance. Corrour Station sits in the middle of nowhere. Still isolated, still remote, still the highest railway station in Britain,